When ambitious black scientist Jason landed a grant to work at one of the country's most prestigious research labs, he thought it was the beginning of a brilliant career. But he soon faced hidden biases from colleagues who couldn't accept his groundbreaking ideas. Determined, Jason makes a risky move to prove his worth. But how far will he go to challenge the system? Don't go anywhere, the best is yet to come. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from and tell us if this story of courage and honesty resonates with you. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring story. Chapter 1: Stepping into New Territory. Jason Martin stood in the gleaming lobby of Talbot Labs, one of the most prestigious research institutions in the country. This was the place where scientific breakthroughs happened, where the names etched in journals and conference panels began. For Jason, a talented biochemist who had spent years building his expertise in genetic research, stepping into Talbot Labs felt like a milestone, the culmination of years of hard work, late nights, and countless sacrifices. He had been awarded a competitive grant to pursue research on a personal project, developing a treatment for a rare genetic disorder that disproportionately affected underserved communities. This was more than a scientific goal for Jason, it was a mission. He had poured everything into his work, knowing the impact it could have on thousands of lives. With the resources of Talbot Labs at his disposal, he could finally conduct the complex, high-stakes experiments his work demanded. But as he took his first steps into the starkly lit corridors of the lab, Jason couldn't ignore a gnawing feeling in his gut. The faces around him were mostly unfamiliar and almost uniformly indifferent. A few scientists and researchers glanced up as he walked past, their expressions neutral, even cold. Jason noticed a slight narrowing of eyes, the hint of skepticism in their gazes. They looked at him as if he were an outsider who didn't quite belong. Ignoring his discomfort, he focused on his excitement, eager to meet his colleagues and make a strong first impression. Jason was introduced to Dr. Grant, the head of his department, who was known for his sharp mind and rigid adherence to protocol. Dr. Grant, a middle-aged man with graying hair and an air of quiet authority, greeted him with a firm handshake but an unsmiling expression. "Dr. Martin, welcome to Talbot Labs," Dr. Grant said, his tone formal. "We expect rigorous standards here, and we prioritize projects that align with our values of tried-and-true methodologies. I hope you'll find your work here challenging, and that it'll meet the standards we've set." Jason nodded politely, determined not to let the lukewarm reception shake his confidence. "Thank you, Dr. Grant. I'm looking forward to bringing new ideas to the table and working with the team to explore some innovative solutions." Dr. Grant's lips pressed into a thin line, and he gave a curt nod. "We value collaboration, Dr. Martin, but we're selective about the methods we apply here. Novelty isn't always a strength." He motioned for Jason to follow him down the hallway to the lab. As they walked, Jason took in the sleek, meticulously organized lab spaces, each section designated for a specific branch of research. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and chemicals, a sterile environment that seemed worlds away from the cramped, underfunded lab he'd worked in during his postdoc. His grant allowed him access to Talbot's cutting-edge equipment, and the possibilities thrilled him. But there was something else in the air too, a tension, an unspoken message that he was under scrutiny. Dr. Grant stopped outside Jason's assigned lab station and introduced him to some members of the team. A few nodded politely, but Jason could sense a distance, a quiet reserve that seemed to hang between them. He was met with smiles that didn't reach the eyes and murmurs of welcome that felt rehearsed. Jason had hoped for a sense of camaraderie, a shared drive for discovery, but instead, he felt like an outsider entering a closed circle. As the day progressed, Jason attended a team meeting where each researcher presented updates on their projects. When it was his turn, he shared a brief outline of his proposed treatment method for genetic disorders. His voice filled with passion as he explained his plans to use precision genetic editing to target mutations at their source, a potentially groundbreaking approach. But as he spoke, he noticed his colleagues exchanging glances. Dr. Grant looked down at his notes, only occasionally meeting Jason's eyes. When he finished, there was a brief silence before Dr. Grant cleared his throat. "An ambitious idea, Dr. Martin," he said slowly, his tone carefully neutral. However, I suggest tempering your approach. Talbot Labs has a history of sticking with proven, reliable methods. We wouldn't want to invest time in projects that are, perhaps, too experimental. Jason's heart sank, but he kept his face impassive. He had faced doubt before, yet this felt different. It wasn't just skepticism but a subtle dismissal. He thanked the group for their input, though the enthusiasm he had felt that morning had started to fade. Over the next few days, Jason threw himself into his work, determined to prove that his approach wasn't just experimental but potentially transformative. However, his attempts to collaborate with his colleagues were met with similar reserve. When he tried to offer suggestions during a brainstorming session, a fellow researcher interrupted him mid-sentence, deflecting attention to another idea. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but soon he noticed a pattern. His contributions were consistently minimized, his ideas treated as secondary. One evening, as he wrapped up his work, he overheard two senior researchers talking in the hallway just outside his lab station. "Did you hear about Dr. Martin's project?" one of them murmured, barely suppressing a chuckle. "Sounds like he's aiming for some miracle cure. I give it a month before he hits a wall." "Let's just hope he doesn't drag us into it," the other replied. They laughed quietly before their voices faded down the hall. Jason felt a surge of anger, but he held it back, reminding himself that he was here to make a difference. He couldn't let their comments derail him. As he packed up his things that night, he resolved to stay focused, to let his work speak for itself. He knew he would have to overcome not just scientific challenges, but the biases and skepticism of those around him. Standing alone in the empty lab, Jason took a deep breath. Talbot Labs was the opportunity he always dreamed of, but it was becoming clear that he would have to fight to make his place here. He would need to confront the silent biases that lurked beneath the surface, challenging not only his scientific skills but his resilience and determination to stay true to his vision. Chapter 2: Unspoken Barriers. Jason's first few weeks at Talbot Labs were a mix of excitement and quiet frustration. He spent long hours immersed in his research, determined to make progress on his project to develop a treatment for genetic disorders. But every time he reached out for collaboration or sought feedback on his ideas, he was met with the same polite indifference. Talbot Labs was a place of cutting-edge technology and ambitious research, but beneath its sleek and progressive exterior, Jason was beginning to see the unspoken barriers that seemed to keep him at arm's length. One of his biggest challenges was Dr. Grant, his direct supervisor. Dr. Grant was an accomplished senior researcher, well respected within the lab and beyond. He was also highly conservative in his approach, sticking to tried-and-true methods, and regarded anything outside his own scientific preferences with open skepticism. Whenever Jason pitched an idea or shared an update, Dr. Grant responded with a tone that was cordial but dismissive, treating Jason's suggestions as naive or unrealistic. During one meeting, Jason shared his concept for a precise gene editing technique that could target specific mutations. His plan involved using CRISPR technology to repair faulty genes, a cutting-edge approach that Jason was confident could revolutionize the treatment of certain genetic conditions. As he explained his vision, he could feel his excitement building. This was why he had become a scientist, to make an impact on conditions that had been considered untreatable for years. But when he finished, Dr. Grant merely pursed his lips, leaning back in his chair with a skeptical gaze. "It's a noble idea, Dr. Martin," he said in a slow, deliberate tone. "But at Talbot Labs, we pride ourselves on solid science. You're welcome to pursue this, of course, but I'd advise caution. This kind of ambition sometimes leads to disappointment." Jason forced himself to keep his expression neutral, but inside he felt a flicker of frustration. "With respect, Dr. Grant, the entire field of gene therapy is evolving rapidly. If we can pioneer a treatment here, Talbot Labs would be at the forefront of a groundbreaking shift in medicine." Dr. Grant raised an eyebrow, his face impassive. "Indeed," he replied, a faint trace of condescension in his voice. "But Talbot Labs is not an experimental playground. I suggest you temper your expectations, Dr. Martin." The other scientists in the room nodded silently, eyes fixed on their notes or the wall behind Jason, offering no support or encouragement. Jason left the meeting with a heavy heart. Dr. Grant's words had confirmed what he had begun to suspect. While Talbot Labs prided itself on innovation, it only welcomed it within rigid boundaries. And he wasn't quite fitting into those boundaries. Over the following days, Jason continued to notice a pattern. Whenever he shared his ideas in group settings, his colleagues responded with polite nods, yet quickly shifted the conversation to other topics, as though his words barely registered. He was beginning to feel like he was speaking into a void. And while no one openly opposed him, the unspoken resistance was undeniable. One afternoon, during a break, he overheard two senior scientists chatting by the coffee machine. "I heard Martin is working on some big gene therapy breakthrough," one of them murmured with a chuckle. "Honestly, he's wasting his time. The field isn't ready for that kind of leap. And neither is he." The other scientist nodded, smirking. "They hire these young researchers with big ideas, but they don't realize Talbot Labs isn't a place for risky ventures. He'll figure it out soon enough." Jason's stomach twisted as he quickly moved away, feeling a sense of betrayal and isolation. The more he tried to engage with his colleagues, the more distant they seemed to become. He started to realize that it wasn't just his ideas they resisted, it was him. The unspoken biases he sensed from the beginning were becoming increasingly apparent. Still, Jason was determined to press forward, and he sought alternative ways to make headway on his project. He spent countless hours after regular lab hours, running simulations and testing his approach with precision and care. He worked late into the nights, taking careful notes and recording his observations, knowing he was onto something significant. He documented everything meticulously, hoping his results would speak for themselves. Yet, every time he made a breakthrough, even a small one, his progress was downplayed or ignored. During one lab meeting, Jason presented initial results from his trials, showing a promising reduction in gene mutation rates. He explained his findings with cautious optimism, hopeful that these results might finally draw positive attention. But when he finished, one of his colleagues, Dr. Emerson, shrugged dismissively. "You're still in early trials, though, aren't you? It's a bit premature to draw any conclusions." Dr. Grant chimed in with a faint smile. "Dr. Emerson makes a fair point. We wouldn't want to overstate preliminary results, Dr. Martin. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture." Jason clenched his jaw, hiding his disappointment. He knew his data was solid, it was clear they were simply unwilling to acknowledge his progress. The walls around him felt increasingly insurmountable, and the sense of isolation was growing deeper each day. But Jason's drive didn't wane. Instead, the more he encountered resistance, the more resolved he became to make his project succeed. He knew the importance of his work and refused to let anyone's doubt deter him. Talbot Labs was filled with people who were content with incremental improvements, but Jason was after transformative change, and he knew that path wouldn't be easy. He realized he'd need to find a way to break through these invisible walls, even if it meant challenging everything Talbot Labs stood for. In quiet moments, when the lab was empty and the hallway silent, Jason would stare at his research board, filled with diagrams, data points, and notes. He reminded himself of why he'd chosen this field, of the people who might one day benefit from his work. And with every late night and quiet morning, Jason became more determined not only to prove his own abilities but to challenge the unspoken biases that stood in his way. What Jason didn't yet realize was that this journey would force him to confront more than just scientific obstacles. He would have to confront a system unwilling to accept change from someone who didn't look or think like everyone else. But he was ready. And he knew his work was only just beginning. Chapter 3: Hidden Resistance. As the weeks went on, Jason's project began to take shape. Every night, he stayed late at the lab, running genetic simulations, refining his techniques, and documenting his progress. He was beginning to see real, promising results, small breakthroughs that indicated his gene editing approach had the potential to effectively target specific genetic mutations. But despite his growing confidence in the project, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something, or rather someone, was working against him. His suspicions started when he noticed that some of his work materials were going missing. One evening, he spent hours preparing a series of CRISPR-guide RNAs, painstakingly sequencing them to test different mutations. But the next morning, as he opened the cold storage, the samples were gone. He searched every corner of his station, triple-checking that he hadn't misplaced them. But after combing through every possible spot, he realized that they weren't misplaced, they'd been removed. Confused and frustrated, Jason approached Dr. Grant, hoping to find a reasonable explanation. "Dr. Grant, some of my samples have gone missing from storage. They were essential to my project, and I need to continue my trials as soon as possible." Dr. Grant raised an eyebrow, his expression one of mild amusement rather than concern. "Dr. Martin, these things happen in a shared lab environment. Perhaps you weren't careful enough when storing them. I would advise you to double-check your organization going forward." Jason felt a pang of irritation. He knew he was meticulous with his work. This wasn't carelessness on his part, someone had interfered with his materials. But Dr. Grant's dismissive response made it clear that he wasn't interested in investigating further. With a tight-lipped nod, Jason turned and left, feeling more isolated than ever. After that incident, Jason grew cautious, documenting every step of his work and securing his samples as best he could. But the accidents didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, he noticed other signs of sabotage. His notes, left in a carefully organized stack on his desk, would sometimes be shifted around, with pages missing. Data on his computer would occasionally appear altered, small errors introduced into the sequencing that hadn't been there before. It was as if someone was deliberately trying to undermine his research, making it appear as if he were careless or, worse, incompetent. One evening, while reviewing his lab notes in frustration, Jason caught sight of Dr. Emerson and Dr. Peters, two senior researchers who had always been cold toward him. They were huddled near the break area, speaking in hushed tones. Jason strained to hear their conversation, catching snippets of their remarks. "Too ambitious, really," Dr. Emerson said with a scoff. "These young scientists think they can walk in and change everything. Talbot Labs has a reputation to maintain, not entertain fantasies." Dr. Peters chuckled in agreement. "He'll burn himself out soon enough. Maybe then he'll understand that we're not here to indulge experimental whims." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. He had suspected that some of his colleagues didn't believe in his project, but hearing it confirmed in such blatant terms stung. They weren't just skeptical of his work, they actively wanted him to fail. Their words lingered in his mind as he walked back to his station, the weight of their dismissiveness fueling his determination. The next day, Jason decided to take additional precautions. He began backing up all his data on a secure, external drive, storing samples in a lockbox he kept under his station, and only sharing essential updates with the few people he trusted. Sophia, his lab assistant and sole ally, noticed the changes and approached him with a worried expression. "Jason, you've been more guarded lately. Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice low. Jason glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "Sophia, I think someone's been tampering with my work. My samples, my notes, they've been going missing or showing up altered." Sophia's eyes widened, a flash of anger crossing her face. "That's unacceptable. You should report it." "I did, but Dr. Grant dismissed it as carelessness." "He doesn't want to listen," Jason replied, frustration evident in his tone. "I don't think he'd believe me even if I had proof." Sophia shook her head, her expression resolute. "If you think someone's trying to sabotage you, then I'll help you keep an eye on things. I've seen how hard you've worked on this project, Jason. They can't keep holding you back." With Sophia's support, Jason felt a renewed sense of determination. Together, they established a system to monitor his work environment closely. Sophia would double-check his samples at the end of each day, and they agreed to record any changes or incidents. If someone was truly tampering with his project, they were going to catch them in the act. Over the next few weeks, Jason's progress stabilized, and he was able to focus more on his work. The regular accidents and interferences seemed to lessen, likely because he and Sophia were vigilant. but the invisible resistance from his colleagues persisted. Whenever he attended group meetings, he would catch dismissive glances or hear quiet chuckles after his presentations. It was as if his every move was under silent scrutiny, his every success a target for criticism. One day, Talbot Labs announced that they were hosting a lab-wide review, where researchers would present updates on their projects to the board. Jason saw this as an opportunity to finally showcase his progress, to prove to everyone that his project was viable and that his findings were solid. He spent countless hours preparing his presentation, meticulously organizing his data, and rehearsing his points. When the day of the review arrived, Jason entered the conference room with a mixture of nerves and excitement. The board members sat around the table, their eyes fixed on him expectantly. Dr. Grant was also present, along with several senior researchers, including Dr. Emerson and Dr. Peters, both watching with folded arms and unreadable expressions. Jason launched into his presentation, explaining his research step by step, detailing his findings and the potential impact of his approach. He showed preliminary results that demonstrated a promising reduction in gene mutations, a critical breakthrough in treating genetic disorders. His voice carried the passion and conviction he felt for his work, hoping that the data would speak louder than any doubt. As he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then one of the board members spoke, nodding thoughtfully. "Dr. Martin, your findings are compelling. This could have a significant impact on the field if further trials are successful." Relief washed over Jason, but his sense of victory was short-lived. Dr. Grant cleared his throat, his tone measured. "I think we should remember that these are preliminary results. Promising, yes, but far from conclusive. We wouldn't want to draw any premature conclusions, especially considering the risks involved in gene editing treatments." Dr. Emerson nodded, adding, "Indeed. It's essential to maintain caution. I believe there's a reason why Talbot Labs has a reputation for steady, reliable progress." The board members murmured in agreement, nodding as they glanced at Jason with a mixture of respect and skepticism. Jason felt his stomach sink, realizing that despite the success of his presentation, the underlying resistance had already framed his work as too ambitious, too risky. Leaving the room that day, Jason felt more determined than ever. The hidden resistance he faced wasn't going away anytime soon, but he was no longer willing to let it define his path. He knew he would have to push forward, finding new ways to break through the walls that had been built to keep him out. As he returned to his lab, he made a silent vow: he was here to make a difference, and no amount of resistance would stop him. Chapter 4: A Crucial Ally. Jason's frustration was mounting. He had worked tirelessly, yet every step forward was met with passive resistance and condescending remarks from his colleagues. His samples continued to disappear or turn up contaminated, and his attempts to share his findings at lab meetings were greeted with cold dismissals. It was becoming clear that certain people in the lab weren't just skeptical, they wanted him to fail. But amidst the mounting pressure, Jason found an unexpected ally in someone he'd barely noticed before: Sophia Reyes, a junior lab assistant who had been quietly observing his struggles. Sophia was known around Talbot Labs for her efficiency and precision. Though young, she was highly competent and ambitious, with a passion for genetic research. She came from a working-class family and had fought hard to earn her place in the lab, overcoming financial and academic hurdles to get there. Jason hadn't spoken to her much before, but he often noticed her in the lab late at night, meticulously running tests and cleaning up equipment after everyone else had gone home. One evening, after another frustrating day of minor setbacks and veiled insults, Jason stayed late to redo an experiment that had inexplicably failed due to a contaminated solution. As he meticulously prepared new samples, Sophia walked over, her expression hesitant but kind. "Dr. Martin, I couldn't help noticing that you've been having a rough time here lately," she said, her voice low but sympathetic. "I wanted to let you know that I've seen how hard you're working. And, if you need someone to double-check samples or help with setup, I'd be happy to lend a hand." Jason looked up, surprised by her offer. "Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate that. It's been challenging, to say the least. It's good to know there's someone here who isn't rooting for me to fail." Sophia's face softened, and she nodded in understanding. I know how it feels to be overlooked. I've seen how certain people here are treated as if they don't belong. And it's not right. Jason felt a sense of relief as he spoke to her, a release from the isolation he'd been feeling. I suspect someone has even been tampering with my samples, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not sure who or why, but every time I make progress, something goes wrong, missing samples, altered data, even equipment malfunctions. Sophia's eyes narrowed, a flash of anger crossing her face. That's completely unacceptable. No one should have to go through that. I can help you keep track of your samples and make sure everything is documented. She paused, hesitating. I've seen things happen here that I probably shouldn't mention. But if you're ready to fight back, I'm on your side. Jason felt a surge of gratitude. Having someone who understood his struggle and was willing to help was a lifeline he hadn't expected. Thank you, Sophia. I could really use the help. I can't afford any more setbacks, this project is too important. Together, they devised a plan. They would double document everything, each sample would have a record, and every test would be logged meticulously. Jason began backing up his data on a secure external drive, with Sophia ensuring that no one else had access to it. She took over some of his routine tasks, allowing Jason to focus on his experiments and keep a closer watch on his work environment. Sophia's support went beyond just administrative help. She became a sounding board for his ideas, offering suggestions and even sharing her own insights on genetic sequencing. Despite her junior position, Sophia was incredibly knowledgeable, often surprising Jason with her understanding of complex genetic editing techniques. Late at night, they would discuss gene splicing methods, CRISPR technology, and novel ways to approach mutation repair. Jason was struck by her enthusiasm and dedication. He could see that she, too, had a passion for transformative research. One evening, while they were reviewing data from his latest experiment, Sophia looked up with a thoughtful expression. Jason, have you considered refining your CRISPR guide RNAs to target only the affected tissue? That way, the therapy would be even more precise and lower the risks. I read a study that suggested a similar approach for liver cells. It might work here too. Jason's eyes lit up. That's brilliant, Sophia. That would minimize the potential side effects and improve the targeting accuracy. I hadn't thought of applying it that way, but it could definitely work. With Sophia's suggestion, they refined the procedure, yielding even better results. The experiment showed a significant decrease in mutation rates in affected cells, a breakthrough Jason hadn't anticipated this early in the trials. With this progress, Jason began to feel hope again, a sense that he was finally moving forward with his project. However, their collaboration did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, as they were working together, Dr. Grant walked by and paused, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Jason and Sophia deep in discussion. His face betrayed a hint of irritation. Dr. Martin, Dr. Grant said, his tone cold, I'm curious why you're spending so much time with Ms. Reyes. Lab assistants are here to support routine tasks, not to take part in advanced research discussions. We must maintain a clear hierarchy, don't you think? Jason held his gaze, choosing his words carefully. Sophia has been incredibly helpful, Dr. Grant. She has valuable insights, and her input has been beneficial to the project. Dr. Grant's expression hardened. Be careful, Dr. Martin. The board expects professionalism. Let's not blur the lines of responsibility. With that, he turned and left, leaving Jason and Sophia to exchange a glance of mutual frustration. After Dr. Grant's warning, Sophia became more discreet in her support, keeping her contributions to the project under the radar. They developed a subtle communication system, passing notes and updates through encrypted files on the lab computers. Their quiet alliance became a source of strength for Jason, who now had someone he could trust. As weeks passed, Sophia's unwavering support not only boosted Jason's progress but also restored his belief in his work. She was more than an assistant, she was an ally who shared his vision for a breakthrough. Knowing she had his back, Jason felt emboldened to push forward despite the ongoing resistance. One evening, as they were finishing up, Sophia turned to him with a determined look. "Jason, I know this is your project, but it's become something I believe in too. What you're doing could change lives. Don't let anyone here hold you back. I've got your back, no matter what." Jason smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Sophia. I don't think I could do this without you." Together, they made a vow to see the project through to the end, no matter the obstacles. With her encouragement and their shared dedication, Jason felt ready to take on the challenges ahead. The quiet alliance he had formed with Sophia wasn't just a means of support, it was the foundation he needed to finally break through the resistance surrounding him at Talbot Labs. Chapter 5: The Breaking Point. Jason had been at Talbot Labs for months now, and while he'd made significant progress on his project, he was constantly fighting an uphill battle. The hidden sabotage, the subtle dismissals, and the chilly atmosphere had worn down his patience. With Sophia's help, he had managed to protect his data and his samples, but the weight of being constantly scrutinized and undermined was becoming unbearable. Every step forward felt harder than the last, and the lab seemed to stifle his creativity rather than encourage it. Then came the announcement that pushed Jason to his breaking point. Talbot Labs had scheduled an annual research symposium, a high-profile event where scientists presented their latest projects to potential investors and board members. It was a rare opportunity to showcase work and secure additional funding. Jason knew that presenting his genetic treatment could validate his research, finally give it the recognition it deserved, and prove to everyone that his work wasn't just feasible but groundbreaking. Excitedly, Jason approached Dr. Grant to inquire about presenting his project at the symposium. He arrived at Dr. Grant's office, his notes in hand, eager to discuss his progress and make his case. "Dr. Grant, I wanted to speak with you about the symposium," Jason began, keeping his tone respectful yet confident. "I believe my findings are strong enough to share. With the recent results, I'm confident the board and investors would see the potential of this gene therapy." Dr. Grant looked up from his desk, his expression blank as he eyed Jason's proposal. After a pause, he sighed. "Dr. Martin, I understand you're eager, but the symposium is an opportunity to showcase our most stable, well-developed projects. I don't think your research has reached that level yet." Jason's heart sank. "But, Dr. Grant, I've documented every step, and the latest trials show a significant decrease in mutation rates. It's solid work, and with the board present, it would be the perfect opportunity to gain support." Dr. Grant shook his head, the hint of a condescending smile creeping onto his face. "Your enthusiasm is commendable, Dr. Martin, but we can't afford to showcase work that's still in experimental stages. Talbot Labs has a reputation to uphold, and we don't want to draw attention to ambitious projects that haven't yet proven their stability." Jason clenched his jaw, barely containing his frustration. "With all due respect, Dr. Grant, this project is exactly what Talbot Labs claims to support: innovative, high-impact research. I'm not asking for anything unearned, I'm asking for a chance to prove that my work has a place here." Dr. Grant's expression turned cold. "That's enough, Dr. Martin. I've made my decision. Your project will not be presented at the symposium. I suggest you continue refining your work quietly and focus on bringing it up to standard." Jason left the office with his heart pounding and his mind racing. This was no longer just about presenting his work, it was about being shut out by a system that refused to give him a fair chance. Despite his accomplishments, he was still seen as an outsider, his work dismissed before it was even given a chance. Over the next few days, Jason felt a growing restlessness. He couldn't stop replaying Dr. Grant's words in his mind, the veiled disdain, the casual dismissal of months of hard work. He vented his frustrations to Sophia, who listened with a shared sense of outrage. "They're deliberately holding you back," she said, her voice laced with anger. "They know your research is groundbreaking, but they don't want you to be the one to get the credit. It's completely unfair." Jason nodded, feeling his frustration deepen. "I can't keep waiting for their approval, Sophia. If they won't give me a platform, I'll have to find another way. That night, Jason lay awake, contemplating his options. He could either stay silent, allowing his project to languish in obscurity, or he could take matters into his own hands and present his work outside of Dr. Grant's approval. After hours of wrestling with his thoughts, he made a decision: he would present at the symposium, whether they permitted it or not. The day of the symposium arrived, and the lab was abuzz with activity. Researchers milled about, setting up their presentations, adjusting slides, and rehearsing their speeches. Jason's heart raced with a mix of excitement and nerves as he prepared his materials, hiding his presentation slides on a thumb drive that he kept carefully in his pocket. He waited until most of the attendees were settled in, and once the first presentations began, he made his move. Spotting an empty slot in the schedule, he quietly approached the podium between sessions, loading his slides onto the projector. The room was filled with board members, potential investors, and Talbot's top scientists, exactly the audience he needed. Taking a deep breath, Jason began his presentation, speaking clearly and confidently. He outlined his project step by step, detailing the gene editing process, showing preliminary data, and explaining how the treatment had the potential to address genetic mutations in ways traditional therapies could not. The audience was silent, fully engaged as he walked them through the details. He could see nods of interest, even enthusiasm, in the crowd. But midway through his presentation, Jason noticed movement near the back of the room. Dr. Grant had entered, his face twisted in a mix of shock and anger as he realized what was happening. Jason could feel the intensity of his gaze, but he pressed on, refusing to let himself be intimidated. He knew this was his one chance to showcase his work, and he wasn't going to stop now. When he concluded, there was a brief silence before the room erupted in applause. Several board members approached him immediately, eager to discuss his research further, their expressions filled with interest and respect. Jason felt a wave of relief, but he knew that the consequences were only beginning. As the crowd thinned, Dr. Grant approached him, his expression livid. "Dr. Martin," he said, his voice low and controlled, "I told you that your project was not ready to be presented. You've completely disregarded my directive and gone behind my back." Jason met his gaze without flinching. "With all due respect, Dr. Grant, my work speaks for itself. You refused to give it a chance, so I made sure it had one." Dr. Grant's face darkened. "This is a severe breach of protocol. There will be repercussions for this, Dr. Martin. I hope you understand that." Jason nodded, his voice steady. "I understand perfectly. But I also understand that Talbot Labs claims to support innovative research, and my work deserves to be seen." With that, Jason turned and walked away, feeling a strange mix of triumph and uncertainty. He knew he had taken a risk, and he was prepared to face the fallout. But as he walked through the halls of Talbot Labs, he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced since he arrived. Back at his workstation, Sophia found him, a wide grin on her face. "You did it, Jason. I saw the reactions, people were impressed. They're talking about your project." Jason allowed himself a small smile. "I did what I had to do. If they won't support me, then I'll make my own way." Though Jason didn't yet know what consequences awaited him, he felt more resolute than ever. He had faced the system and, for the first time, had claimed a victory on his own terms. Chapter 6: The Bold Decision. The days following the symposium were a whirlwind of mixed emotions for Jason. On the one hand, his presentation had been a resounding success. Board members and investors had shown genuine interest in his research, several of them even approaching him afterward with questions about his work and possible collaborations. For the first time since joining Talbot Labs, Jason felt that his project was being taken seriously. But the victory was bittersweet. He knew he had directly defied Dr. Grant's authority, and he was certain the repercussions would be severe. The very next morning, Jason received a curt email from Dr. Grant, summoning him to a private meeting in his office. The message was brief but unmistakably serious. Jason's heart pounded as he made his way to Dr. Grant's office, knowing that this conversation would determine the future of his project, and perhaps his entire career at Talbot Labs. Dr. Grant sat behind his desk, his posture rigid, his eyes steely as Jason entered. He motioned for Jason to take a seat, the silence in the room stretching as he looked Jason over, his expression unreadable. Finally, Dr. Grant spoke, his voice cold and measured. "Dr. Martin, I'm sure you're aware of why we're here," he began, his tone clipped. "You were given a clear directive not to present your project at the symposium. Yet you took it upon yourself to defy that directive and proceed with your presentation anyway." Jason met Dr. Grant's gaze, feeling his pulse quicken but refusing to look away. "Yes, I understand, Dr. Grant. But I believe that my work deserves to be seen, and the symposium was the only opportunity one had to share it with people who could truly understand its impact." Dr. Grant's expression hardened, his fingers tapping impatiently on the surface of his desk. "Understand this, Dr. Martin, Talbot Labs operates on structure and respect for protocol. Your action showed a blatant disregard for the chain of command, and that is simply unacceptable in this institution." Jason swallowed, feeling a surge of anger and frustration rise within him. He had worked tirelessly, produced undeniable results, and yet, here he was, being reprimanded not for a failure in his work, but for challenging a system that had tried to silence him. "With respect, Dr. Grant," Jason replied, keeping his voice steady, "my work is in line with Talbot Labs' mission to pioneer impactful research. I've demonstrated that my approach is viable. But from the beginning, I've felt like my work has been dismissed, not on its merits, but based on preconceived judgments about me and my ideas. I simply took the opportunity to let my work speak for itself." Dr. Grant's face tightened, his gaze narrowing. "If you feel your ideas have been dismissed, perhaps that's because they haven't aligned with the standards Talbot Labs has cultivated over decades. We don't entertain risky or radical ideas here, we value precision and stability." Jason took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of his decision hanging in the balance. He knew this was a turning point. He could back down, apologize, and accept whatever punishment Dr. Grant decided to impose, or he could stand by his actions and make a bold decision to pursue his project on his own terms, even if that meant leaving Talbot Labs altogether. "I understand, Dr. Grant," Jason replied, his voice firmer now. "But I won't apologize for doing what I believe is right for the future of this field. My project isn't risky for the sake of being different, it's risky because it has the potential to change lives. If Talbot Labs can't support that vision, then maybe this isn't the place for me." Dr. Grant's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He hadn't expected Jason to push back, much less to consider walking away. But Jason's resolve was unwavering. He knew that if he stayed, he would be compromising not just his project, but his integrity. After a tense silence, Dr. Grant leaned back, folding his hands. "Very well, Dr. Martin. If you're so determined to pursue this path independently, then I won't stop you. Consider this your final day at Talbot Labs. You have until the end of the day to clear out your things." Jason felt a mix of relief and finality settle over him. He nodded, standing up and meeting Dr. Grant's gaze one last time. "Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Grant. I'll make sure my departure is seamless." As Jason returned to his lab station, a quiet determination filled him. He had made his choice. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt a sense of freedom. He was no longer confined by Talbot Labs' rigid constraints, he could pursue his project as he saw fit. When Sophia heard the news, she approached him, her expression a mix of worry and admiration. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jason nodded. "I couldn't keep working here under these conditions. I need to be in a place where my work is valued for what it is, not hindered by politics or protocol." Sophia hesitated, then spoke with a determined expression. "Then I'm coming with you." Jason looked at her, stunned. "Sophia, you don't have to do that. I know how much you've worked to be here. I'd hate for you to sacrifice that because of me." She shook her head, her voice resolute. "This isn't just about you, Jason. I believe in this project. I believe in what we're doing. And frankly, I'm tired of this place too, tired of the way they treat people who don't fit their narrow definition of excellence. I want to work where I'm part of something real, something that could change lives. Jason felt a surge of gratitude. Sophia's support meant everything, and together, they began making plans to continue their work outside of Talbot Labs. They spent the rest of the day packing up their materials, carefully organizing Jason's research notes and backing up every piece of data they'd collected. They knew they were taking a risk, but for the first time, it felt like the right kind of risk. That evening, as they walked out of Talbot Labs for the last time, Jason felt a strange sense of clarity. He didn't know exactly where their next steps would lead, but he knew that he was done compromising. He and Sophia decided to set up a small, independent research lab using the limited funds Jason had saved. They would have to start from scratch, but they both believed in the project, and that was enough. Within weeks, they transformed a modest space into a functioning lab. The equipment was basic, and resources were scarce, but the freedom they felt to explore their ideas without restriction was liberating. Together, they dove back into their research, refining their gene editing techniques and pushing forward with renewed determination. News of their departure quickly spread, and a few supportive scientists reached out, offering advice, mentorship, and even small donations to keep their lab afloat. Slowly but surely, they gained momentum, drawing interest from independent investors intrigued by the bold, unconventional approach Jason and Sophia were taking. With each day, their belief in the project grew stronger, fueled by their shared commitment to make a real difference. As Jason looked around their new lab, filled with potential and possibility, he knew that the decision to walk away from Talbot Labs had been the boldest and best choice he'd ever made. Chapter 7: The Presentation. Months had passed since Jason and Sophia had walked away from Talbot Labs and set up their own independent research lab. They'd started from scratch, working long hours in a modest space, yet their progress was astonishing. With each successful experiment, they felt themselves moving closer to a breakthrough in gene therapy that could change the treatment landscape for genetic disorders. Word of their independent research spread in scientific circles, and soon, Jason received an invitation to present their findings at the National Genetics and Biotech Conference, one of the most prestigious events in the field. The invitation was more than just a chance to showcase their work. It was validation, proof that their project was being recognized by the wider scientific community. And Jason knew that a successful presentation here could open doors for additional funding, partnerships, and even more advanced resources. The stakes were high, but he felt ready, more prepared than ever to stand in front of his peers and prove that his work was worth their attention. As the day of the conference approached, Jason and Sophia worked tirelessly to perfect every aspect of the presentation. They spent countless late nights in their lab, refining data, creating clear and engaging visuals, and rehearsing Jason's speech. Their passion for the project drove them, and they knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to gain the support they needed to take their research to the next level. "We're not just presenting data," Jason reminded Sophia one night as they finalized their slides. "We're showing people that this approach can make a real difference in treating genetic disorders. This is about more than just research, it's about lives." Sophia nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And that's exactly why we're going to make them see its value. Let's make sure there's no question about it." They carefully crafted the presentation, beginning with the problem that their work aimed to solve: genetic disorders that had, until now, been untreatable or only managed through invasive procedures. Jason would walk the audience through their approach, detailing the gene editing techniques they had developed and the promising results they had already observed in preliminary trials. Sophia worked on simplifying complex data into visuals that could easily communicate their findings, ensuring that each slide reinforced the importance and feasibility of their work. When the day of the conference arrived, Jason and Sophia were both excited and nervous. The venue was a sprawling convention center, packed with hundreds of attendees, researchers, investors, medical professionals, and scientists from every corner of the field. Jason felt a pang of anxiety as he looked out over the bustling crowd, realizing just how many eyes would be on him. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was what he had been working toward for years. As they set up their equipment and prepared their materials, Jason noticed familiar faces in the audience. A few former colleagues from Talbot Labs were present, including Dr. Grant, who had dismissed his project as too ambitious. Dr. Grant stood near the back, his arms crossed, his expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jason felt a flash of anger but quickly brushed it aside. Today wasn't about proving Dr. Grant wrong, it was about proving the value of his work to the entire scientific community. When the time came for his presentation, Jason took the stage, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The lights dimmed, and his first slide illuminated the room with the title of their project, Precision Gene Therapy, a breakthrough approach to treating genetic disorders. He began by addressing the significance of genetic disorders, sharing statistics and personal stories of families who had been impacted by these conditions. He could feel the audience's focus sharpening, their attention zeroed in on him. He then transitioned into explaining the science behind his work, describing the novel CRISPR techniques they developed and the careful, targeted approach they used to edit specific gene sequences without affecting healthy cells. The room was silent, captivated as he walked through each step of their process. When he presented the data showing mutation reduction rates and cell repair in trial samples, he noticed a few murmurs of approval ripple through the audience. Scientists leaned forward, taking notes, nodding as he spoke. For the first time, Jason felt the full impact of his work being acknowledged. He could see genuine interest and admiration in the faces of those watching. Sophia, who was running the slides from the side of the stage, gave him a subtle thumbs up as he transitioned to the results. Jason took a deep breath and continued, showing clear, visual representations of their data, bar graphs illustrating the significant drop in gene mutation rates, side-by-side images of treated versus untreated cells. He explained how their approach minimized risks associated with gene editing, emphasizing the precision and safety that set their method apart from other experimental therapies. As he wrapped up, Jason addressed the potential applications of their work. "What we've developed isn't just a solution for one disorder," he said, his voice steady and confident. "It's a framework for treating a range of genetic conditions that were previously considered untreatable. We're standing on the brink of a new era in gene therapy, where we can move beyond simply managing symptoms to truly addressing the root causes." When he finished, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. Jason scanned the audience, watching as several prominent researchers stood, applauding with admiration. Investors, scientists, and medical professionals were all captivated by his presentation, and for the first time, he felt the weight of true recognition. As the applause died down, the floor opened for questions, and several attendees raised their hands. One of the first questions came from a renowned geneticist, Dr. Patel, who had pioneered earlier gene editing methods. "Dr. Martin, your approach to minimizing off-target effects is impressive," she said, her tone admiring. "Have you considered how this might be adapted for other complex conditions, such as neurological disorders?" Jason nodded. "Absolutely, Dr. Patel. The framework we've developed is flexible and can be adapted to target different types of cells, including neurons. We believe this approach has potential applications in neurogenetics, autoimmune conditions, and more. We're eager to explore these possibilities with further research." Other scientists chimed in with similar questions, delving into the technical details, offering suggestions, and even proposing potential collaborations. Jason's mind buzzed with excitement as he fielded their questions, each one a validation of his work. For the first time, he felt fully accepted by the scientific community, his ideas respected and his research validated. Then, toward the end of the Q&A session, Dr. Grant raised his hand, and a hush fell over the room. Jason felt a momentary pang of anxiety but held his ground. Dr. Grant stood, his face unreadable, and addressed Jason. "Dr. Martin, I'll admit, your work here is impressive," he began slowly, his tone surprisingly neutral. "But gene editing remains a controversial field with significant ethical and clinical challenges. How do you plan to address these concerns moving forward?" Jason met Dr. Grant's gaze, his voice steady. I'm aware of the concerns, Dr. Grant. That's why we've developed rigorous safety protocols, and we've already demonstrated the precision of our method in initial trials. We're committed to ethical, safe, and effective treatments, and we're working closely with experts in bioethics to ensure that our approach respects the highest standards. Dr. Grant nodded, a hint of reluctant respect in his eyes. Well, Dr. Martin, it seems you've certainly taken your project further than I had anticipated. I wish you continued success. The response was met with a mixture of surprise and approval from the audience. Jason knew that Dr. Grant's words, though grudging, were a significant acknowledgement. Jason had won over not just the board and the investors but even those who had once doubted him. As he stepped down from the stage, a rush of relief and pride washed over him. After the presentation, Jason and Sophia were swarmed by attendees, each one eager to discuss potential partnerships, offer resources, or simply congratulate them on the groundbreaking research. Investors expressed serious interest in funding their lab, and several scientists proposed collaboration opportunities, opening doors Jason had never thought possible. As they left the conference center that evening, Jason felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. He had finally proven that his work had value, that his ideas mattered, and that he had the strength to push through even the toughest barriers. He had made the bold decision to leave Talbot Labs, and it had paid off, not just in recognition, but in the knowledge that he was building something that could change lives. Turning to Sophia, who was equally elated, Jason smiled. "We did it, Sophia. We're finally making an impact." She grinned, nodding. "And this is only the beginning, Jason. Imagine what we can achieve now that they're taking us seriously." Jason felt a surge of excitement. For the first time, the future felt limitless. They had faced resistance, overcome doubt, and found allies in the most unexpected places. Now, with new partnerships and resources, they were ready to take their research to new heights, and the journey was just beginning. Chapter 8: A New Path. With the overwhelming success of his presentation at the National Genetics and Biotech Conference, Jason found himself at the cusp of a new era in his career. In the days following the conference, he and Sophia were inundated with offers of support. Major research institutions, private investors, and even government health agencies reached out to discuss partnerships, funding, and collaborative opportunities. For the first time, Jason's dream of developing a widely accessible gene therapy treatment was within reach. The newfound attention was thrilling, but it also brought challenges. Now that his work had gained significant recognition, he would need a bigger team, more advanced facilities, and a formalized research lab to move forward. The makeshift lab space he and Sophia had been working in, which had served them so well during their early days of independence, was no longer adequate for the scope of research they were now undertaking. One morning, as Jason and Sophia sat in their tiny lab, surrounded by piles of notes and equipment, Sophia looked around and chuckled. "It's hard to believe we've outgrown this place already." Jason smiled, nodding. "I know. It's time for a new chapter. We need a real lab with resources to support this work on a larger scale. If we want to reach as many people as possible, we have to start thinking bigger." Determined to take the next step, Jason and Sophia began reviewing the various partnership offers they had received, carefully weighing each one. They didn't want to lose their independence by partnering with an institution that would impose too many restrictions or divert their focus. Their goal was to create a research environment where innovation could thrive, free from the bureaucratic red tape and biases they had faced at Talbot Labs. After several weeks of discussions and negotiations, they secured a partnership with Genova Therapeutics, a progressive biotech firm known for supporting groundbreaking, socially impactful research. Genova offered them a state-of-the-art facility, a generous grant, and complete autonomy over their work. They could hire their own team, set their own goals, and even run independent clinical trials. It was everything Jason had hoped for. The day they moved into their new lab space was one of the most gratifying moments of Jason's life. The facility was breathtakingly modern, equipped with advanced technology, clean rooms for controlled experiments, and collaborative workspaces. Their lab overlooked a bustling cityscape, a constant reminder of the people whose lives they hoped to improve. As they set up, Jason and Sophia began hiring a team of dedicated researchers, carefully selecting individuals who shared their passion and commitment. They chose scientists who, like them, had struggled to make their voices heard in traditional institutions, ensuring that their lab would be a place of respect, inclusivity, and innovation. Among the first to join was Dr. Patel, a geneticist Jason had met at the conference, who specialized in precision gene editing techniques. She brought invaluable expertise, and her enthusiasm for the project mirrored Jason's own. With her on board, they rapidly expanded their team, bringing in specialists in cell biology, bioinformatics, and clinical trial design. Within a few weeks, their small independent operation had grown into a full-fledged research team. With resources now at their disposal, Jason's work accelerated at an astonishing pace. The team dove into the next phase of the project, refining their gene editing method and conducting rigorous safety tests. The goal was not just to improve the technology but to ensure it was accessible and affordable, prioritizing the communities that were often overlooked by traditional healthcare systems. Jason was determined to make sure that their breakthrough would not be confined to the privileged few, but instead, reach those who needed it most. One evening, as the team worked late into the night, Jason called for a break and gathered everyone in the main lab. With excitement in his eyes, he pulled up a series of slides showing the early results from their latest trials. He presented data that indicated their gene editing technique was achieving a higher rate of accuracy than even their most optimistic predictions. "This is incredible," Dr. Patel remarked, scanning the results. "With this level of precision, we could start clinical trials much sooner than anticipated." Sophia beamed, looking around at the team. "This means we're closer than we thought. If these results hold, we're looking at a whole new era in gene therapy." The team broke into applause, a tangible excitement filling the room. Jason looked around, taking in the faces of his colleagues. They were no longer just co-workers, they were a family, united by a common mission to bring change to the world of medicine. As they continued discussing the implications of their work, Jason felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. He had taken a risk, walked away from the safety of an established institution, and built something from nothing. And now, together with Sophia and a team of brilliant scientists, he was leading an initiative that could revolutionize genetic medicine. Months later, they held their first meeting with a community health organization to discuss partnerships for affordable access to gene therapy. Jason explained their approach, focusing on the goal of creating treatments that would be accessible to underserved communities. The director of the organization, a woman named Carmen, listened attentively, her eyes lighting up as Jason shared their vision. "This is exactly what we need," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "If you're able to bring this to the communities we serve, it could change countless lives." The conversation with Carmen reminded Jason why he had taken this path. For him, this wasn't just about scientific achievement, it was about creating real, lasting change that could benefit those who had historically been denied access to advanced medical care. As Jason walked through the lab later that day, he found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The struggles, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, they had all led him to this point. His journey had shown him that true innovation required not only scientific rigor but also resilience, courage, and a willingness to break away from the norms. Looking over the bustling lab, he felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. This lab was a sanctuary for progress, a place where bold ideas could flourish and where every team member's voice was valued. Jason knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them, knowing he had built something meaningful and lasting. Turning to Sophia, who was busy coordinating the next set of experiments, Jason smiled. "We're really doing it, Sophia. We're creating something that matters." Sophia looked up, grinning. "And we're just getting started, Jason. The best is yet to come." Together, they were carving a new path, one where innovation, integrity, and compassion led the way. Jason's vision had become a reality, not just in his research, but in the culture and community they were building, one where science was truly in service of humanity. This story about Jason and his determination to break through prejudice and bureaucracy is truly inspiring. It highlights how even the most talented and driven people face invisible barriers in systems where innovation is often controlled by status and protocol rather than by progress. Jason isn't just fighting for his ideas, he's challenging a system that holds back genuinely impactful discoveries. What resonates most is his relentless drive and independence, showing how believing in one's work can empower you, no matter the obstacles. This story reminds us that real breakthroughs don't happen without risk, and Jason's willingness to stand his ground and follow his path might inspire other scientists and innovators to do the same. It's a reminder that success is not only about scientific achievements but about staying true to your principles and striving to make a meaningful impact. Jason and Sophia's journey isn't just about science, it's about the human spirit's refusal to back down. It shows how essential it is to have the right allies, genuine ambition, and independence. This is a story of talent and courage, a powerful reminder that it takes both to change the world.